Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
That is me. I am the Paranoid American, but just because I'm paranoid and American doesn't mean I don't have a good sense of humor and I don't like to laugh. I think I've proven that. If you've watched enough of me anywhere, I don't take a lot of this stuff too seriously, but I do take it seriously. It's a interesting dynamic, and I got another kindred spirit, another like-minded fellow here, and that is my homeboy, Owen. What up?
What's up, T? How you doing, man?
Good, man. Here, I like that view, but I like being equal here too.
That's so cool. I dig that view too. That's a lot of fun what you can do.
So I met you through podcasting. I don't even remember what show it was on, but I think we connected immediately. We looked into each other's eyes. There was fireworks. And we've done a couple of shows. Please forgive me. Didn't we do like an Illuminati mind control self-defense course? And we got into the history of the Bavarian Illuminati and NLP. And so like we're there, bro. We're brothers from different mothers for sure.
Yeah.
Even the beards, bro. We even got like the little skunk stripes and everything. So
that's right.
You might have been separated from birth or something. I don't know, man.
It's possible, man. It totally is. Yeah, dude. It's been great, and you're so well informed about a lot of this stuff, and kind of like you were saying before, having a sense of humor. It's the only way to deal with it. It might be my cope, right? It's just like humor. My grandfather was that way. It kind of runs in the family. That's like the way that I can deal with stuff, because the reality of some of these things that we get into through the conspiracy world is daunting and overwhelming at times, and that's something that I want to try to help people with. That's kind of been my heart, from the beginning, is to try to make some of this stuff a little bit more lighthearted and easier to deal with and navigate. And when I kind of came from more of this conspiracy mind, very I don't know, I would say just really desperate. And then I kind of got into spirituality through that desperation, and through spirituality and just kind of looking within myself and a lot of these other ideologies, Eastern and Western, both. I found a nice little mix of some different techniques, approaches, mindsets, ideologies that really do help, from Stoicism to modern New Age kind of ideas, which obviously they can go too far. Everything can. And so it's been this interesting, I would say, development of taking a lot of these ideas and synthesizing them together in order to be able to have a, I would say, realistic view of the world, but also be able to get out of bed in the morning.
I'd love to hear like a stoic stand-up routine, just like all stoicism. You know what I mean? Like you get angry if anyone's enjoying themselves or laughing.
Yes.
It could be good, man. It could be a good one. And I'm curious if you said like you were into conspiracies early on. How early? Like we talking straight out the womb? Did mom give you a chick track and was like, the Jesuits are the devil, they're trying to kill us, or how did it start?
Well, it started really, I would say, in 2012, and it came hard and fast for me. It was like the dark night of the soul thing. I was kind of blindsided because before that point, I was really just a pleasure seeker. I was just enjoying my life as much as I could and doing things that I thought would be fun, and I enjoyed doing all that adventurous stuff, raft guiding, and
how dare you enjoying
yeah,
life?
yeah, all kinds of like nature stuff.
Disgusting hedonist.
I know, right? And
enjoying the mountains and the weather and the outdoors. It's
right.
disgusting.
Living in a van, literally down by the river, and going down the river all the time. And, I enjoyed it. I really did. And then I hit 30. And when I hit 30 in 2012, right around that time, I don't know, something happened. And I started looking into some of these things, and my whole entire worldview really shifted. I kind of got an attitude toward the establishment and the institutions that I went through, and I felt stolen from intellectually as far as my education goes and stuff like that. And now it's all part of, I think, the healing process for me, because what the reality that I was taught, let's say in school, because I did go to college, and I was one of those, like, I was like in and out. And I finally went through and got through with college. And then whenever I got out into the real world, a lot of what we were told and taught in school, in college, and before just seemed to be the complete opposite of the reality that I was experiencing. So I kind of went into this subjectivist kind of phase where I was reading a lot of Ayn Rand and listening to Brett Veinotte. The School Sucks podcast was one of those amazing podcasts that really helped me to navigate. He's another one of those people who kind of gets into stoicism later and some of these other ideas. But Richard Grove, there was one documentary in particular that really got me, and it was called What You've Been Missing. And it had all these different people on there. Corbett of the Corbett Report was on there. This was back in like 2011, I think it was made.
Shout out to James Corbett.
Yeah, dude, that dude rips. And so all these different people were in there. I think Jan Irving and like all these other people who have gone, their own different ways now.
Okay. Yeah. Shout out to Jan too. He actually helped me on one of my comic books about Robert Gordon Wasson.
Oh, that's awesome.
Robert Watson.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he's definitely an expert in a lot of things.
Shout out to Jan. Dude, Jan, I would say stoic. Jan's definitely in that stoic category.
Yeah, and the trivium, learning about the trivium education, learning about the classical Greek stuff. And I'm getting back into that now. Like, that's where I'm kind of going back into. I've kind of gone into the woo-woo world as well. But again, that was kind of like afterwards. So I would say around 2015, 2016 was really when I get into that. And I found this book called Reality Transurfing that a lot of people really liked. I super resonated with it and just decided that I would just create the audiobook and publish it. And so that's where a lot of people and I started to connect a little bit on YouTube and started doing podcasting and stuff. It was really through that. And then,
was it called Reality Transurfing?
Yeah, Transurfing, all one word. I don't really know. He's a Russian guy. I don't really know how it's translated, but I would say it's transcendental surfing. Probably one of my favorite books is Robert. I'm sorry, I do love Robert Anton Wilson, but even before that is Ralph Waldo Emerson, Self-Reliance. And so the Transcendentalists, I think, had it pretty nailed. And I listened to a bunch of that stuff, and I would say that transurfing it kind of echoes a lot of the sentiment in the transcendental movement, but it's a little bit more scientific. It talks a lot about more quantum kind of stuff and how energy moves and kind of collects, which I thought was interesting because you find a lot of that stuff in the magic world, these ideas of tulpas and egregores and stuff. In reality transurfing, they just call it pendulums. So it's like an energy collective, a collective conscious, even, you could say. And then if you go back even further, there's this old book that's French called The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. And it talks a lot about these energies and how people will act super irrationally when they're in a group, even the most rational people. And there is this like energy that is created when people are in a group. I was just at a football game over the weekend, and it's so palpable. People are really in group mind. They're barking at each other. They're
It's scary to read Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd and then go and immediately and see a huge crowd, because it like you start to stop seeing 100 people and you just see the mass. It's like the blob that came and just enveloped them all. What's the there's a video game, I can't remember, it's like Katasuki, Kingdom or whatever, but it's like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and like envelops stuff, where like that thing, that blob, that group of people is now one thing, and you can like reason and negotiate with it, because the second you like pose it a question, right, it's not like there's going to be an internal discussion. They'll kind of just be like, it'll exhibit its wants and its needs as that big collective. It's such a weird, fascinating topic, man.
It is. It's incredible. And when you start looking deeper into some of these other, religions or philosophies or whatever, they all have similar things, whether it's a demon or a toku or whatever it is, energy form, thought form, however you want to classify it, or, give it a personification, but it is its own sort of entity, and it has its own needs and wants, which is basically more energy. And the big thing about it that I would love for people to understand is that when we oppose something, we're actually actively feeding that which we oppose. Like, that's one of the biggest esoteric truths, and especially one of the big lessons in that book that I really didn't see anywhere else. A lot of the ideas you can find in other books, but when he's talking a lot about energy and how it works, and whenever we go against something, we're actively, we're polarized against it. We're actively really contributing to that as a force, because that negative energy is going right into whatever that ideology is. So if we go back to the football game analogy, you've got the first team, that say the home team, and everybody goes wild. Well, you feel all that energy. And then the next team comes out and they all get booed. But you feel that energy too. It's just a different type of energy, but it's energy, it's just energy radiated. It's negative. Now, if when that team ran out and nothing happened, everybody just shut up. What if they all like turned around and just didn't say anything? It would feel so empty and weird, and awkward, like it'd be like, what is going on? There would be no energy for that team to feed up on. You see those football players that are like, yeah, hate me, I love it, But if you take that energy away, now it's just gone.
Well, I guess in the world of Gustave Le Bon too, I might argue that the crowd, unless it's been like pre-orchestrated, would be incapable of organically doing that either. Because like a normal untrained person, it will be really hard for you to say, okay, you're really charged with energy, now stop.
Right.
And then like expect that an entire crowd without rehearsal could do that. So again, like the crowd can't do that request, which is what makes it all the more weird, because then it's like, if it were to happen, you would know instinctively. Like, you wouldn't even have to understand psychology. You'd just be like, oh, they must have planned to do this,
right?
Because your brain's like, I wouldn't have done that, spontaneously, unless I knew ahead of time. It's just a weird, but you don't know it until you know it, right? Like, once you understand the crowd, once you understand the NLP stuff. So where did well, actually, I wanted to ask you where comedy came in, but I've got an even more important question.
Sure.
And you can be totally honest. This is a complete safe space, pre-recorded. So if you slip up and you're embarrassed to admit anything, you said that you kind of had your eyes open in 2012, and then you immediately mentioned Ayn Rand. So I wanted to ask, like, did your aunt post something on Facebook, and that's what threw you down the rabbit hole and like QAnon, or I guess that would have been before QAnon, but
yeah, it was a little
before. Do you remember what it was in 2012 specifically?
I don't exactly remember what it was, but I did immediately start listening to Alex Jones and really anything I could find.
Brother.
Yeah, that's right. They're coming to get us, the globalists, and the frogs are gay, and I was like, okay, well, here we are, all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I'm eating poison. And like that's part of this whole, just getting slapped upside the head with a completely different worldview kind of thing that was challenging, especially at the time. Like at the time, so I'm like living the high life, being a raft guy, just a total bum, just, I mean, not, by choice, living out of a van in literally right down by a creek.
Sounds kind of awesome, man.
Taylor's, it was.
And, yeah.
I mean, there's just nowhere to go at that point. So like when you I'm hitting 30 and I'm like, all right, I've been a ski instructor and a raft guide, and I've done these cool jobs, and they are work. I mean, it's not, I know probably for a lot of people outside looking in, they're like, well, that must be what a charmed life. And it's true. It is. There's still a lot of work to do. It's not all as
you're not on vacation. You're
not
even though you're like with people on vacation, you're not the one on vacation. Yeah.
No, there's only so many times you can take that same boat down from Missouri before you just want to just.
Were there any horrible puns that people would like always say?
Well, all raft guides are true comedians. So yeah, so as soon as you get on the bus, they're like, "Hey, who's ready to go? Who's ready to go skydiving?" It's like, who's never done this before? And then everybody would, a lot of people would raise their hands and they'd be like, well, it's just a bus ride, guys, relax, calm down. So yeah, the whole entire trip is just messing with your guests and riffing on them and telling them jokes, a lot of cheesy kid jokes. I know a lot of those, but they're great, I think. And so I was doing that and then ski instructing. And then at 30, it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do next? Like what is next for me at this point? I've got to grow up, I guess. And I didn't really see much of a future in the adventure industry unless I wanted to manage. And then what's the point in doing that? Like now I don't get on the water anymore. I don't get to do the fun thing that is associated with the job. So it was time for me to do something else. So I came home and started working on a tree farm and started really beginning my entrepreneurial journey along with learning about, I mean, who else was big at that time? There's that Canadian guy. I can't remember what his name was, but
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson knows it's another guy who's like real like anarchy. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, the guy that was like divorce your parents.
Stefan Molyneux. That's his name.
You go. Yeah,
so I was listening to him.
Divorce your parents guy.
Yeah, that guy. And so I was listening to him. Just anybody in that world, because like libertarianism, classical liberalism, dude, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like as a stand-up comic, you see me, you probably would think I was liberal. But first of all, about that, I don't want anybody to know what my true beliefs are really through my act. I mean, maybe a little bit, just to kind of have that. Maybe a suspicion about it, but you'll notice a lot of comedians, a lot of people might think, yeah, I think like you. And then it's like, no, I'm just pointing at something out. But I say all that to say, it was a lot of anything I could find in that alternative media stuff. So combined with Alex Jones, Brett Van Nott, Stefan Molyneux, anyone who was talking, Larkin Rose was a huge influence. All his books are fantastic. He's a great writer. He's a great debater. And when it comes to the idea philosophically of anarchy, and I was already kind of in the libertarian camp anyway, like, do you remember Doug Stanhope's 2008 special? It was called No Refunds. And he's wearing like a libertarian jersey and he's just going ham. It's
he ran for libertarian president at some point, didn't he? Or like an offshoot of it.
He was really involved and really politically active for a long time. And then at a certain point, he just gave up and just became kind of what he is now, which is, he's a lot darker now than he was, but I think he wanted to help people through comedy to understand things. And I don't know if that's really all that feasible, to be fair. That's, I think, his realization.
I mean, even before his libertarian run, he had some really dark material. He had a book. I don't even want to say the name of the book that he had, but it was like playing with a P word. And it was like he was running, I guess, like a Chris Hansen style thing online and like trolling predators online, and then published a book of all of the crazy nasty things that like they would say, and then he would just like, it was like typical Doug Stanhope fashion. But that was like really, really freaking dark, man. That was like in the early 2000s, I think. And I think it might have been in his No Refunds, one of my favorite rants, where He's like, Jesus, or that Bible saying where it's you teach a man to fish, then he's got to go get a fishing license, and he's got to register with the IRS, and then the ATF shows up because he's in and it's like such a great, it's such a great rant, man.
It is,
no,
man.
no, this is an interesting dynamic because Doug Stanhope, I think there was also a stand-up where he brought Alex Jones along. If anyone's not seen this before,
I gotta check
it
that
is a train wreck that you need to watch. If you just look for like Stanhope, Alex Jones, Austin, I'm pretty sure that's where it was.
Okay.
And he has Alex Jones open for him.
Wow.
And Alex Jones is not a comedian. And this is way before he was like chilling with, Kill Tony. This is before Kill Tony existed. Because again, this is like early 2000s, I think. And he just runs out and he's just like calling people sheep and they're all enslaved. And then Doug has to like follow this up. And the first thing is just like, that was the biggest mistake. Because it's like he got energy in the room, but it wasn't the right energy. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, Stanhope has an interesting way where he can bring in these conspiracy theories and like government regulation and then turn it into jokes. But man, like, almost everyone outside of Stanhope that ever tries to joke about a conspiracy theory, it's usually very awkward and like falls flat. Like, so is there a special trick? Like, what is it about joking about politics and conspiracy theories? If it's not something silly, like if it's a real thing, like how does that, suck the air out of the room?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think so. What I've learned is that as soon as you take a side, and it doesn't matter what that side is, even if people agree with you or they don't, they go, I don't want to just hop on to your, bandwagon or your soapbox or whatever. So I think people are kind of put off by that. And I think it's also a little bit lazy to just agree with people. There's a lot of comedians that do that just to get some validation. And I get it, right? Like we're up there trying to get laughs. So sometimes it's a little bit harder. So if you can get them to clap, talk about something they like, if that's their football team or something about their town or whatever, to just kind of get them on board and get them focused to you. Sometimes it's just like a really helpful trick. But there is a way to joke about that stuff that's not polarizing. You can, for instance, make fun of the character of the president, and liken him to someone else, and use an analogy without saying that he, is a bad president or that the Democrats are stupid or Republicans are dumb or, so-and-so has gone full blown Republican or whatever, which is now a punchline in comedy, which is hilarious to me. But it's such a weird time too, because like, you can't really be punk rock and be liberal either, like it's so establishment, so it is a weird kind of place to be as far as like offending people's sensibilities. One thing that I learned, because when I first got started, I was like, I can't be offended. Like no one can offend me. But the truth is that's not true. Anyone can be offended. And talking about the conspiracy stuff, I think Ron Funches has the best take on this. And I think he wins. He's like, so y'all don't believe in conspiracy theories? He's like, so you guys think the government's just batting 1,000, at telling you the truth? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you guys believe. And then he's like, I have a kid and I lie to that guy 200 times a day or whatever, like, it's like, it's completely, so showing how unreasonable something is or how absurd or silly it is, I think is a great way to break that tension. And then the people are more likely to go along with you if you're going to go down. And then another part of that is just the perspective or the point of view of the comic, right? Like if I go and see someone like Lewis Black, I know what his perspective is. And I laugh because he's talking about his perspective and being congruent to it. So even though I don't agree with what he's saying about X, Y, or Z, I understand why he's convenienced and angry and upset. So when he says that next thing, I laugh and I relate to him because I've been exasperated too. So it kind of took me a long time to pick up on that, on what that is. But like having your perspective and your point of view and remaining true to that, I think that makes you able to have a different opinion than the audience. I think there's a couple of different approaches where you can have an outrageous opinion and that's funny. Like I have a funny opinion and I love that. And you can also have your own true opinion and make that funny as well. You know, so I talk about libertarianism, and I talk about how being a libertarian is kind of like being a conscientious objector at a sex party. You know, it's like, I'm going to be here, and I'm just going to point out all the, like I'm just going to point out
it has to be voluntary.
There's going to be some consequences. I'm not going to get involved. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll be at the corner, just kind of watching, but I'm going to let you guys know, I'm going to be annoying about it. That kind of thing, right? Where I can talk about that. And then I've had other comedians come up and just stack a joke on top of that. Like Corey Islet was so funny. Like, after I did that bit and it went well, and then she came up after me and she was like, yeah, the libertarian, that's the one who's like, at the end of class, they're like, do we have any homework for tonight? It's like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like, that's funny. The person that's actually, kind of calling the stuff out that everyone else is just kind of, afraid to acknowledge. So it can be fun that way. If you sell yourself in a certain way without trying to, I think what it is people get tired of being like proselytized to. So whenever you go up there and you try to convince them of something, they immediately want to be left alone. So they kind of pull back on you a little bit. And sometimes when you realize that, that's even more fun, because you can push them a little bit, have them pull back, and then bring them back in. And now they're like, okay, now I really trust this guy. He's going to take me somewhere I didn't want to go and then bring me back. So he knows what he's doing. So they can kind of relax a little bit. And then you can get a little bit more outrageous. If you hear somebody like Chris Rock or some of these more accomplished comedians, when they're talking about performing, they talk about how they stack their material and put the really controversial stuff toward the end, because they've got these people coming along. And what Chris Rock says is, he's like, my favorite part of the show is like about 45 minutes in, where the audience is completely with me and I ain't even said shit yet. I'm about to say the stuff that's going to, fuck them up. And, and so they're all with me. So we're going to see kind of what happens at that point as he kind of pushes back a little bit. And you can sort of see that dynamic. It's like, comedy is like anything else. People want the full range of emotions. They don't, if it's just, I don't know, it can be very bland and boring, even if it's pretty good. I like to see a full range too. When I go to a show, it's kind of fun to see a comic bomb or two. I don't obviously want to bomb, but it's always fun to watch, this dynamic, and the energy is always different every night too. That's another thing that's crazy. It's like Saturday night, I fucking bombed. And then last night, it's basically the same set, just absolutely crushed. So it's like, I don't know. There's so much to it. It's a very mystical art form, I would say, as far as things go.
Well, I think there's definitely something to the occultism of comedy in that archetype of like the court jester, because it's such a weird thing where Alex Jones, if he went out on the stage and he says something, people would get offended. But if like a comedian comes out and says the exact same thing, but says it with like a snark and says it with, like tongue in cheek, and it's like, am I being serious? Am I not being serious? Like a Stephen Colbert style approach. If you had someone coming out saying what Stephen Colbert would say in character as Stephen Colbert, then it's like, what a horrible, hateful person. But then Colbert says it. And I think that same thing kind of goes all the way back, where the court jester was allowed to point out certain flaws with like the kingdom and things, because it was like this parody, and it was almost like, I'm making fun of everybody, so therefore I get this pass. It must have been a very scary job, I think. But I mean, the amount of power, and like in the terms of like occultism, right? Like the occult power that you've got in being the person that is shaping the energy of someone that has the real power, right? It's like they've got the power and they bounce it off the jester, and the jester is the only, because everyone else is a yes man. The jester is the only one that's technically not a complete yes man. So I think that there might be something like super deep rooted into humans where like, all right, the comedian gets a pass because comedy is where we get our actual truth from, but we get it in this way that everyone feels like you have to be smart enough to understand it. And it's like, oh, well, I know that he's joking, but other people don't know he's joking. So that means it's okay because like we're on the level. But I think there was another great example too, where Jon Stewart semi-ended Tucker Carlson's like first life. Like if we were like to peel back his lifeline, right? Because they were on a show, I think it was like a Crossfire or something, and they're having a debate, and Tucker Carlson like criticized him on something, and Jon Stewart's like, dude, the show that comes on after me is freaking puppets making prank calls, because I think it was like Crank Yankers. And it's two things. One, it's a great freaking point, because it's like, you know, he was expecting to have this like really in-depth conversation about this political point, and the other guy's like, dude, you know, like there's dick jokes coming on in 15 minutes, you know, you want to wrap this up. But at the same time, he was making a political stance. He absolutely was drawing a line in the sand, but then he criticizes the other person. It's like, oh, you want to criticize a comedian? How dare you? And it makes the other person look like the cranky pants, right?
Right.
And man, there's something very powerful in recognizing like I have that power, and actually having the finesse and the comedic chops to be able to say controversial stuff in that comedic way. Because truly, if you did that without the comedy, you get banned off of social media for hate speech. But if you do it and people laugh, it's allowed. It's the weirdest. I feel like this is like one of the ultimate conspiracies that we're just never going to figure out in our lifetime. But like, why do comedians get a pass?
I don't know exactly why, but I have been looking into like the Greeks. So I've heard comedians and people who talk about comedy and teaching it talk about how joke writing is an ancient art form. And I'm like, an ancient art form. And so as I start looking around and digging and researching, yeah, man, the Greeks knew how powerful a joke could be, how that could so easily dismiss a point, you know, even if it's not even addressing, even if there is a fallacy, even if it's a fallacious argument that's pinned back. If it's,
you'd have to know that it's a fallacious argument, and you'd have to know the rhetorical law, because there's like a list of here's all the rhetoric laws. And like, once you know those, it's exactly what you're talking about. Or like, I can just change your word. If I reuse your words and then add this little mocking thing at the end, there, it's like, oh, that dude just pulled out like a 7-B,
right,
you know, subparagraph 9. Whoa, you know what I mean? But like, they all have like it's like almost a formula that if you take those rhetorical skills, you can dismantle anyone's argument. And if you also know the logical fallacies, you know how to like bob and move and dance in between those and still throw those punches. So like, I mean, you wouldn't even have to convince me that it's an ancient art form, because it blends the entire trivium together, right? Like a good pun. I think that's another reason everyone like rolls their eyes. But what's the phrase? Like a pun is the highest form of humor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but that's because it requires the full trivium. You have to understand grammar, because usually a pun is like a word that can mean multiple things, right? So then you also have to understand the logic, because usually the multiple things that the pun refers to are some kind of like, like they're not symmetrical. So like you're setting up an expectation and then you're subverting it, which makes it the joke. And then the rhetoric, this is comedic timing and knowing how to deliver the joke. So if you don't have the entire trivium down, and I don't think that it's like I don't think Stanhope was like classically trained in the 7 liberal arts, right? Some people just naturally understand how these things work. They just put the pieces together. Leading this into a question, I almost feel like it's this NLP area too, where just like you said, Chris Rock maybe builds the audience up for the first 45 minutes and gets that energy going. That's the same thing as like a sales pitch, right? If you go into like a multi-level marketing scheme, the first 45 minutes is going to be like big light show, flash, bang, get the girls out here dancing. Let's watch this hologram. And then it's like, okay, now open up your pamphlets to section 9, you know what I mean? And then like you try to steer that energy. And I feel like comedians probably do this naturally. They do like the spatial anchoring, like all of that. But if you know NLP and then you go up on stage like you do you ever find yourself like, I'm gonna like whip out this trick from the toolbook? Or are you like in the moment and all that goes out the window?
I try to stay in the moment as much as possible, but like I was talking about earlier, kind of pushing the audience and saying something that I know they're going to like, be like, oh, or like, the groaner, you push them with a groaner and then they're like, ah. I thought I want to come back to the pun thing too, because I think that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times in that moment, and it takes a while, obviously, to be able to be consciously, in the NLP world, because you're in this moment with this audience, and every one of those moments is different. So while we do a lot of the same material, it might be slightly different or accentuated differently, or we might try to incorporate somebody from the audience into a particular joke because they fit that in that moment. And those are all just different ways to kind of play with that energy and to get people more invested in what it is that you're saying. But ultimately, comedy is kind of a sales pitch too, right? Like whenever I go up there, I'm kind of selling myself, and I've got 10 minutes to be like, here's the person that I am, so that you guys understand who that is. Do you like me? Do you want me to keep talking and making you laugh? And that's kind of the whole thing. Like however long that pitch is, usually, we start out in comedy, we got a 5-minute set, and that's kind of like, you hear a lot of the same things, right? Like, oh, well, I'm Jewish, or, this is my ethnicity and I'm from here. And so that means this thing. And that's like a common joke.
They should just run out on stage and pull like the big, like one arm jack and the 3 dials. And it's like,
yes.
You are a black, female, bing. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you just make a joke about that. Like my friend Sean had one because he's Hawaii-Irish. So he's like Hawaiian and Irish. So he's like a really bad drunk driver, So, that's his joke about his 2 ethnicities or whatever. So you see a lot of these similar kind of, I would say, templates or models to kind of make a joke and try to get the audience to understand who you are. Because once you sell your perspective, I really do think you can go pretty far. Like people knew Carlin was an angry old man. So he sold that perspective, and he's able to take that insanely far, farther than anyone could prior to him at that point, at least politically and stuff like that. So in the moment, most of the time it's kind of planned for, I would say, most comedians, even the stuff that is kind of like crowd work a little bit, because it's just a way to play into some stuff that they may already have up their sleeve. But it's kind of like, I heard Bill Burr talking about this because Patrice was talking to him apparently about walking around the joke and doing the joke differently. And I completely understand what he meant by that now. It took me a long time, but in the moment, I think it's more emotional than it is like a conscious choice, at least for me for now. Maybe, as I continue to develop, I might be like, oh, well, I can, do some anchoring here. We call it a callback in comedy, where you mention something and then you say it again later. And that's, that's all that is. So, but it's a really effective device, and it's a great way, to be memorable, because that's really what it's all about. You want to be, memorable to the audience. So they're like, I like that guy. I want to hear him again, or what else has he got? Right. And so there's this kind of small demographic within the audience that you might call the tastemakers, the other comedians that book, the bookers, the producers, all that kind of stuff, who kind of spot the talent. And you want to...
The secret society.
Yeah, the secret society, right? Like that's a whole thing to navigate. And then you've got the rest of the audience. So you want to make everyone laugh, but kind of focus on that secret society a little bit more, so that they know, so that they want to book you, so that you get more shows, so that you get more opportunities in comedy. And it's crazy, man. When I got into this, I thought it was just, you just go up there and you just, launch it at the audience, and that's what it's all about. But oh man, doing all the booking and all the producing and managing of things is it's quite a lot to, it's exhausting, dealing with the venues and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of things stacked on top of each other, other than just telling dick jokes.
and it's not really like an industry that has evolved too much, at least not for the actual workers. I mean, at least it's a little bit different from, say, being an adventure guide, where at least in the world of comedy, if you really like doing the comedian part, you can just always do the comedian part, where like maybe you can't always be the adventure guide. At some point you have to go in the back office. In comedy, if you're really good, you're not going to like get stuck in the back office, but you're going to have a lot of people in a lot of back offices along the way, I guess. And I want to point out too, a couple other NLP tricks that I always see comedians doing, maybe not on purpose. And maybe you should, maybe you could use these tricks and program your audiences. But there's the one of the embedded story, and that's where you start one story and then stop yourself and then start another one and then finish that one and then finish the outer one. And if you, in the middle of that inner story, if you like mention your name, you know, damn it, Bootsy, or like, you know, like whatever your catchphrase is, you say it at the crescendo of that inner story, and then you finish it, and then you know, go back in and finish the outer story. And that's the thing where like someone's driving back home, that even if they don't remember what the joke was, damn it, Bootsy, you know, that'll kind of like be stuck in there. And another one is the spatial anchoring. And this one, you were saying like you got a groaner, right? So if you know you've got a groaner coming up, some comedians, they'll kind of like walk to a certain part of the stage and give that groaner and get the audience's reaction. And then once that energy dissipates, they'll kind of like walk back over to the where they were before, where the energy was a little bit like less groany, you know what I mean? And then now all of a sudden, if you'll just imagine there's like an X on the ground, it's like, okay, I'm going to get into groaner territory. Let me start meandering over here. And again, since comedy is about expectation and deferment of that, and like, you know, subverting expectations, you can like start walking slowly over to the groaner corner and then like not tell a groaner and come back here and tell it, or like you can play with that. I think that's what you're saying, like you can circle the joke and figure out how you want to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that that audience in that moment is, and the way that you present that joke or get to the punchline, I should say, it might change based on so many things, right? Like I might, if I've got an engaged crowd, I might start asking them questions before I ever get to the joke. Maybe we'll have some commonality, or maybe we'll find a new joke on the way to that later joke. But it's man, there's so much to consider with this, and things I didn't even ever think about when I just, you know, when I got started, because I guess I was just ignorant about the whole thing. But then, you know, doing all these other things, and you find out that a lot of these comedians, people like Bill Burr, he owns All Things Comedy. You know, like several of these very well established comedians, Tom Segura, for instance, who I get that all the time. People think I look like Tom Segura all the time. So I have a whole bit
great
about
looking
that.
guy.
Yeah, he
great
is, especially
guy.
now. He's really in great shape and all that. But a lot of these guys, they're incredible businessmen too. And I think that has a lot to do with having to do these things. You know, it's a lot of the stuff you don't see, the producing, the creating, the promoting, you know, putting shows together. And in all that is relationship management. And honestly is very difficult. You know, you want to try to give as many people as many opportunities as possible, and hoping that you'll be reciprocated for that. You know, and being true to yourself, having boundaries, but also being generous, working with club owners, dealing with money. And you know, I'm sure you can imagine there's a lot of things that could go wrong, can get fucked up. People have attitudes and egos and all kinds of things in the mix. So it can be very frustrating and difficult. And there's a lot of pressure on you as a comedian, if you're producing and creating a show, to get the audience there, to do, you know, all the promotion, to have a great show, to perform well, to have all of the lighting and the tech stuff sorted. You know, all of these little elements that add up to one great show. I came from the music scene, and I thought comedy would be a lot like it. And frankly, it's really not. You know, it's your responsibility as the comedian, and, you know, trying to force people to come check out comedy. You know, it's like some people it ain't for everybody, man. You know, like some people don't have any business at a comedy show whatsoever. And there's a lot of people who have never been to. So that's kind of interesting. We try to get new people to come and try it out at an open mic or something like that, and create a community and a culture. That's what I've been trying to kind of focus on more. Like last summer, gas went up to like $5 a gallon, and, you know, nothing was really happening. Before the pandemic, I was traveling a lot more. And then, so I was like, well, I'll just try to build some stuff here locally. And so I've been doing that and having a good bit of success with it, but also, you know, learning a lot of lessons and having some frustrations as well. You know, things don't always go the way that you want. You lose a venue, or, you know, they change their mind, or they don't promote or get their stuff out in time, or, you know, a million billion things can happen. So trying to make those decisions and put yourself in a place where it's like, I need to work on my act, and I want to also give other people opportunity. I don't want to spend all my time in a back room and be that guy, and then everybody else gets the benefit of all the work that I've done. but at the same time, I got to work on my act. I can't, just have the same 5 minutes every time I go up in my room. People are going to get bored and leave. So it's like, juggling all of these little pieces. And I have a lot of even more respect for stand-ups than I ever did. And because of the whole business aspect and the hustle and the grind of it, because, a lot of times we have to make our own opportunities or else we're not going to get them, right? If you can't get into that secret society, then now what do? You have to create your own, audience. You have to create your own way to be able to perform. Otherwise, you can drive around and do open mics and pay to go up, or you can learn how to put together a show, produce a show, and get people there, right?
We're talking secret societies here in the comedy world, and it's interesting to me because, and maybe I don't know. Let me pose this as a question, because I guess mine would be way more based on assumptions, since I'm so far detached from that world, aside knowing from people in it. But it seems that in comedy, obviously merit has a huge role, right? Like you can't just get kind of like pushed up to the front lines. As much as you hate Dane Cook, right? He knew how to make people laugh. He knew how to tell a joke. He knew how to be funny. It would be very hard to put a completely unfunny person up, unless that itself was the joke and it was like an Andy Kaufman style bit, right? But the other aspect of this too is that, unlike maybe in the music world, where if you truly have merit, you can be the worst person in the world and probably still have a fan base. When it comes to comedy, there's a huge merit aspect, but you can also blackball yourself to the point where you could be the funniest person on the planet and you just might never have an outlet if no one wants to book you, if no one wants to put you onto shows. Because I guess it's weird that it's possible. I mean, some people during the pandemic put out, like, here's me doing stand up in my room alone in front of like a computer screen. It wasn't my thing, right?
It was terrible.
But it's completely different. And it's not the same as if I'm a musician, I can be a horrible person, but then put out like a really quality album that everyone loves. So in comedy, there is this very real secret society of like gatekeepers, where if I don't let you on the stage and I don't let you go into that meeting, or I tell everyone else at that meeting, hey, all these other projects that we're working on are going to be gone. It is such a small, tiny world of comedy that it's not like, okay, well, I'll just go and join like the right wing of comedy or the blue wing of comedy, or I'll go join the libertarian comedian group. Not the funniest comedian group, by the way.
Right.
But there's no refuge once you burn yourself. So in that regard, man, I almost see it as the secret. I mean, I don't know if there's an actual name. What is the name of the actual secret society in the but if there was an actual group that had a name, they would be far more powerful relatively within that industry than Freemasons right now, any place on the globe, I think. Because, like, yeah, you can control like a little town. Maybe you can control the economy of a certain state or industry, maybe even nationally. But to talk about in an art form, right? Like, you could blackball someone out of an art. Who was the dude that lied about like his dad died in like the towers or whatever?
Yeah, Steve Ranazizi. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, it's a black mark. And what is it about the comedy world? Is it just because it's small, or maybe and I'll ask a leading question here, but could it possibly be that same like occult power of the court jester? Like, if you violate that royal power, like, you've got the energy of the country, and even though you're telling dick jokes, it's like there's a responsibility that goes with it. And if you screw that up and do the wrong thing, even though you're a comedian, like, I don't know, it's such an interesting role to have.
Yeah, you definitely can be blackballed. It only takes, one time. It's like climbing the rock climbing. You only have to screw up once. But I think it's kind of a little bit more regional until you get maybe to like that Hollywood sort of thing. But there are even multiple sets of sort of, groups who are gatekeeping to kind of to basically navigate. And then now, especially after Me Too and all of that, you've got people who will make false accusations just to ruin someone's reputation. And that's a thing to watch out for too, And so not everybody who books is a comedian, and not everybody who's a comedian books. So that's another part of it. And on one hand, I respect a comedian who books more because I know they know how hard it is to get up and tell jokes. On the other hand, I know they're going to have a little, probably, they were probably going to have more of a bias than someone who's just a booker, right? Like they're just like, well, they're based on, if it's just a booker, then hopefully they would be more merit based. But then again, there's narcissists on, I'd say, both sides. I mean, people who are in comedy are looking for validation, attention, and stage time and all that kind of stuff. So I think they're often willing to do some. I'm not trying to generalize the whole group, but
Let's do it. Let's generalize.
but there's a lot. But I mean, just like politicians or actors or whoever, right? Like these people are vying for the most power. Some people see it as very competitive against each other, and they'll do whatever they can to put themselves forward. I think a lot of
I was gonna say this is also where the secret society maybe comes in a good way, right? Because it's like if you're an influencer, if you're a Logan Paul, yeah, you can get people to flood the venues and like make sure that you always get stage time because it brings people in the door. But if those tastemakers are just like, whatever, I don't care, then you still don't get to that next echelon, right?
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So there's all of that. And I will say this, I don't think it's ever been this way where you had more opportunity as an individual, as a comedian, and more, I would say, agency than you do now. Even with all of this, you still have more of an opportunity now as an individual than you ever did in this world. Because it used to just be you try out, and the only thing that's going on is like whatever the Punchline Club is, or whatever the comedy club, the Laugh Hut that's in your town. That's the only way to get onto a circuit, so to speak, is you start hosting there, and then somebody picks you up and you go on tour with them and you middle for them. Well, at least for now, if you want to do sketches online, or if you cut your own clips and post those online, then you can gain your own following. That's what a lot of these comedians are doing. Now they build up a lot of stuff and then do a big campaign, which is smart. And I get to see, how people approach that over the past couple of years, because so much has changed with podcasting. And if you take somebody like Stavros Halkias, I don't know if you know who he is. He's super funny. He does a ton of crowd work. He's really fun and funny. He was on a podcast called Come Town, which got really popular over the pandemic with Nick Mullen and Adam Friedland.
He's got glasses. Guy with the glasses.
Adam Friedland.
No, Stavros.
Oh, Stavros. Yeah, he sometimes wears glasses. He's kind of a bald guy. He's a robust looking guy. He likes to eat, and he laughs a lot during his set and does a lot of crowd work. And he talks about gross stuff. He's like, "Who here has had a threesome?" He'll start, that's kind of like one of his go-to questions. That he does a ton of crowd work. So what he did was he just took a lot of these crowd work clips and started putting them out, a day, every single day that he's putting out new little clips. So he didn't eat into his material, but he used all of those crowd work clips to promote his special on YouTube. Then the YouTube special comes out, and then a lot of people, watch that. Now they know who he is. They check out his podcast and all that kind of stuff. So watching the business model and how people are approaching it, it's different. And then you got somebody like, let's say, Jay Leno, completely different take, right? Like Jay Leno's never put out a special. So, from his angle, he's like, why would I do that? I can keep my material and over 20 years, keep developing it, or however long. And then, the amount of money that I can make per performance per each one of those jokes is so much higher, because once you put that special out and you put it out for everybody, now all that stuff, you've already burned it. It's gone. So you can't really do it again, Yeah,
it's a good point. Like you can keep it in these like small little crowds. It would be like if a band doesn't release certain songs and you have to go and watch them live in order to see, which is a very real tactic, right? And it also emphasizes that it's different each time, and that the crowd energy is a little bit different. So you mentioned something about like the regional aspect of this, and you mentioned like the Me Too thing, which kind of changed a little bit of the comedy landscape. And I guess that there's kind of been this initiative, Ron White and Joe Rogan and Red Band and Tony Radcliffe, where they're trying to make Austin the comedy capital. And there's like this big migration tour to get on Kill Tony and just, I guess, be out there and they're just all opening up clubs. Is that a real thing? Like, why aren't you in Austin right now? You know what I mean? Like, is it like truly like this new mecca? Like, what do you think about that whole movement?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's great when comedians.
You kind of have to say that too, though, right? You don't get blackballed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm obligated to say I think it's a great thing. Well, yeah, I think every locality can have a good comedy scene. I don't think it needs to be where it's it's just LA and New York and Chicago. I think that's silly. I think that's been outdated for a while. And especially with everything that we've dealt with over the past couple of years, I don't want anything to do with a highly dense area. You know, I live in a smaller town and I like it, but it's a big enough place to where we can have a comedy scene here. So I think the way that it works really well is if in every city there's a good comedy scene established and multiple opportunities for comedians to come through, because the way that we wear out our audiences is by doing the same material over and over again. And when you're a local comedian, it's kind of like that Bible verse. What is it? Like a prophet has no honor in his hometown. It's like people come and see me every week at my open mic, right? So they're like, who is this guy? But when I go up to, like, you know, Johnson City, Tennessee or whatever, I'm like the headliner and they're like, oh, we're going to stick around.
Well, yeah, dude. Again, like if you're in a band, you pretty much, like, one of the unwritten rules is you don't perform in your own town, because then everyone's just like, oh yeah, like that asshole from high school, I know him, you know what I mean? But if you just go a couple town over, it's like, oh man, these guys are from a different place, they must be big to be on the road, you know? But it's a real thing. It's, you know, it's NLP, dude.
It is a 100%. So a big reason why I'm not in Austin is I'm just building my own business here, because I don't want to really be beholden to anything. What if I did get blackballed? You know what I mean? Like, I recently read a guy's book on creativity, and the biggest, like the first chapter, I want to say it was like, don't quit your day job. You know, he was like a cartoonist and then he had another job. And his whole point was, if I went full on into cartooning, then I would have a boss and a person, you know, telling me what I can and can't do. I'm beholden to them and they can manipulate me or make me make decisions about my work and force my hand to do certain things. So because of that, he's like, I don't quit my day job. And so I thought that was very smart. I've always been a fan of having multiple streams of income. It's just, if you can, right? Like, I understand the other side of that picture too, where it's like, put all your eggs in one basket and watch it like a hawk. I mean, I think you have to do that at first anyway, even if you do have multiple streams. But, you know, I like that idea. I've always liked that idea. I've always, you know, since sort of when I hit 30, I've always looked for different ways to make money that would not necessarily be trading my time directly for dollars. So I'm a big fan of that. That's a big reason why I'm not in Austin. And then another reason is, if I build the scene here, then when people from Austin or Nashville or Chicago or wherever, they come here, they have opportunities. And I made that happen, or am part of a group of people who made that happen for them. Then hopefully whenever I'm like, hey guys, I want to come to Austin, then they'll be like, oh dude, I got a room for you. Come hit my mic, you know, come do this. And that's kind of how that whole scene works. It's like
that reciprocation you were talking about earlier, where you just kind of, you pay your dues, another Masonic term, and hope that it kind of comes back at you again.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, paying dues in any industry or thing. You know, it's like you start from the bottom, you work your way up. When I got into comedy, I dove to the bottom, and I think that's a good way to approach things, because it's like, I don't want anybody to be like, well, you got here because you knew so and so, or, you know, it's like, I don't want to get there.
I heard your mom's like Pauly Shore or something, man.
right, exactly. It's like, I want to be good enough. My goal, everybody has a different goal. Some people's goal is to be famous. Some people's goal is to have a Netflix special or a this or a that. That's all well and good. My goal is to be good. I don't really give a shit about any of that stuff. Like, yeah, sure, it'd be cool to get a special or whatever. I can shoot my own special though now. Like, I've seen all these other people do it if I wanted to. You know, so it's not that dangling carrot like it probably used to be, where it's like, oh, we'll do this, this, and this, and you'll get a sitcom or whatever. But everybody's got.
You're like, dude, I've got a 4K camera in my pocket right now, right?
Are you kidding me? Yeah,
yeah. I don't need all of that.
A minute or two, and have a stupid, dumb TikTok thing if that's what we want. So for me, it's really about that and just developing that. And then when it's time to campaign, taking a lot of notes and understanding how other people have done their marketing and strategically, push themselves sort of out into the forefront. Cause that's kind of how you'll see that every so often. You'll see kind of a comedian who kind of comes out into the forefront. Shane Gillis was, after he got canceled from Saturday Night Live and all that, but he kind of came out into the forefront. Tim Dillon kind of came out into the forefront, and Tim Dillon had a lot of opportunities even before that I believe he thought he was ready for. And didn't get those opportunities, and nobody knew because he hadn't come to the forefront yet. But at that time, at the time that it's opposed, I think that's just one of those things that kind of happens. And then to try to be prepared and have a decent strategy for that. For me, I really like a lot of the spirituality stuff and the conspiracy stuff and talking about these topics. A lot of comedians probably started doing comedy before they maybe went down these roads. So they may or may not want to talk about these things. It's like, and it's kind of up to you. I do a lot of self-deprecating humor too, but I like to talk about things that I think matter, because I don't want to just waste time up there and feel like I didn't say anything, right? Like if I came up here, of course I want to make you laugh, of course, but I want to talk about something that, kind of something to think about, something, that I don't want to waste your time and just tell something pointless up there.
Well,
I want people
speaking of getting deep, before you said that you wanted to get back into puns.
Oh yeah. So
the highest form of comedy.
The highest form of comedy. Yeah, and I will respectfully disagree that it's the highest form of comedy. But I think that's the beginning of it. That's the beginning of learning that ancient skill of writing jokes. And stand-up comedy is not just writing jokes either. It's kind of like a speech, as we've talked about, like the NLP thing, telling a story within a story, and putting those little things in there. Story is how we all learn as humans. So story is very powerful, but it's not just random jokes too. Because if you just go up there and just say random jokes, that's cool. Again, I'm not throwing shade on that.
Like Mitch Hedberg,
I love Mitch Hedberg so much, or Stephen Wright, right? Like that's great. But for me, and just the way that I approach it is like I'm trying to kind of like have a spiel, some sort of a spiel, and then within that spiel, there are lots of jokes and maybe a couple of points. Nothing too crazy, but everyone's got a different sort of approach. There's a guy named Stuart Huff, who's one of the best living comics. Most people probably never have heard of him.
Yeah,
but
I've never heard of him. Stephen Huff?
Stuart Huff.
Stuart Huff.
Yeah, Stewart. He's got a special from like 2018 that's on YouTube, and it's incredible. He's teaching you the whole time. He's like an educator that just makes you laugh. And there's a lot of other comedians, I would say too, that people just have never largely heard of, that are incredibly good at being an orator and captivating people's attention, telling them stuff, teaching them stuff. And so there's so many different ways to kind of do the art form. But it's jokes, and it's kind of a speech, and it's a perspective. So it's all these kind of things that kind of wrap together that really kind of make your act whatever it is. And that's part of it too, is marketing and branding and that sales pitch. It's like, so what are you? What's your mix? What do you do? You're a this, you're a that, it's like, that I had Jason Webb here. Right. And he's like a Southern preacher with a Southern preacher's son with a dark twist. It's like, that's a great little tagline, right? Like when I go to see him, I know exactly what I'm going to see based on that tagline, right? He's got an accent, he lived in the church. I can relate to that if he grew up in the church, so I already kind of know what I'm getting, And so
Yeah, I'm thinking Larry the Cable Guy, where like the name and the brand, like it sets you up. It tells you what mode to be in when you show up to the show, instead of like, welcome John Smith, and you're just like, oh, what's this guy's deal,
right, exactly. And so a lot of other comedians will ask you that, like, what's your mix? What do you, how are you working? What's your act about, kind of thing. So that's part of it too. And it's like, you don't know that obviously when you first start, you have no idea, but because you're like refining your brand of humor and how you're going to approach people and things and what you're going to talk about and why. So there's like all of this stuff. And that's, I think, why it takes a lot of development for comedians, because it's a collection of skills. It's not just one skill. I thought it was just one skill. I was like, oh, stand-up comedy, I'll learn that. And then you're like, well, learn stand-up comedy. Okay, well, you got to learn to write a joke. You got to learn how to public speak. You got to learn how to produce a show, book a show, manage relationships, be an entrepreneur, work with venues. All of these things are kind of part of that, part of paying your dues, right? Like if somebody who's been working their butt off, they come through and they headline, you can almost bet that they've run a room and hosted a show themselves. And they're like, thank you so much for hosting, dude. I feel for you. Thanks for doing all this work, but they know, because they've been there and they probably hosted a room for 5 years and did all of those things in order to get to where they are now. So it's part of the growth, the graduation to the next level type of thing.
Well, we were talking about that earlier too, before we started, that sometimes people, it feels like they just came out of nowhere and they've got all this, they've got an hour of material, and it happens with bands too. And I guess when you don't know how the sausage is made and you don't care about the inside baseball, consider like a band that comes out and they've, they skyrocket and they got platinum albums. A lot of the time, if it's their debut album, they've had 10, 12, 15 plus years to just like flesh out the cream of the crop, right? Like their best material. And comedians might do that too, where maybe nobody even knows that you do comedy and you're working out your material in a bunch of little small clubs, and it takes you a few years. And then finally, I guess you get to a certain critical mass and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to go and do like a long routine. And then like, oh man, this newcomer onto the scene. And it's like, and again, on the band analogy, it's like, dude, I've been a master of drums or guitar or singing for, 2 decades, but you're just only hearing of me now because I finally, got my shit together, and I finally figured out how to maintain relationships. And then now here I am, world.
Yeah, dude, it's exactly like that. And that's what's been so cool about catching up on your stuff, is I see, what you've been working on over the past several dozens of years. And it's a huge collection, a huge body of work. And I think the value of doing all of these things is learning and refining the skill. And then you see everything that you've put in your time and energy and effort into. And it's like, okay, well, it's exactly like you're saying, and then you get in there and then you're like, you're primed and ready. And it's like, okay, now I'm ready to release this. I'm ready to bring it. Cause you don't want to pull the veil too soon. It won't be like that great work or whatever, right? Like you want to pull the sheet off the masterpiece. You don't want that to be half done. You want that to be like, yeah, oh, wow.
Some people do, man. I mean, honestly, with social media, let me get on my like old man rant train here, because I did turn 40 this year, so I'm allowed to, but sometimes with social media, there is almost this concept, and I'll date myself too, because I go into hermit mode. I was joking that like, you might not hear from me for 2 or 3 years. It's not because I fell off and I got something else. It's just like 100% of my focus might be on this other thing. But like when you come back from that and you kind of like unleash it onto everyone, it takes a lot out, but also the social media concept is like post something every day, have an update every week. So if I've got this like huge one thing I've been working on, I like to post little teasers and stuff, but just like I don't want to like rip the whole thing down and be like, okay, come back next month and I'm going to rip it down again. And there'll be like a little bit of extra detail on the shoulder. And then I'm going to rip it down again the next month. And maybe like the eye will be a little bit more completed once it's actually done and you're so proud of it. And it took you like years to get there. everyone's just like, oh, what changed between, oh yeah, I guess like there's like a strand of hair over here on the forehead. Like, that's cool, man. So like you lose that energy, right? It's if like I would almost, I mean, let's get woo woo, but you know, it's Tesla realizing that like you send the energy away, you wait for it, you have to have the timing. When it comes back, you just kind of sprinkle a little bit more and you send it back on its way. And after it does that a few times, you're like, okay, now it's got enough power to like, but you have to synchronize it, right? You can't just like wait for it to come and then go away and then take the sheet off, because it's like, oh, the energy's not here. What happened? So there's a lot of planning with it.
It's a lot. It is. And that's part of it. I think it's a mistake when I see a lot of comedians posting clips too soon, right? It's like, you're posting a clip, make sure first of all that it's a really funny clip, not that just, you know, you caught some people laughing and now people are going to think you're funny because, you know, you posted a clip with people laughing in it. You know what I mean? Like, post a
that
funny...
would actually be a pretty good commercial though, if it was just like them about to say a joke and then you cut the joke and then you just show the audience laughing and it's just like nothing but...
Yeah, that would. I mean, now if you can do that, by all means, you know, do that. But you know, it's like, just from a marketing perspective, I think we get told what to do a lot and not what the strategy is behind it. It's like, people are like, well, post your stuff and put it out there. Well, hold on, like, wait just a second. Like, let's talk about this. This needs to be strategic. You know, don't just start doing that willy-nilly without a direction or without a bit of a strategy, because it's like you said, you know, you pull that, you know, that sheet off and then you've got like unfinished work or whatever.
Owen's just stripping again. He does this every Friday.
Exactly. And then, you know, and
he's
then people don't care, you know, they just lose interest. And then they're like, well, and if you've seen somebody bomb, and you know, this to be true, you know, I'm suffering from this myself. It's like, if you see somebody bomb, you can't unsee that. Like, it doesn't mean the person's not funny and they're not going to kill the next night. And we do all bomb, but you still can't unsee that. So like, if you could put that out there, you know, something that is lackluster, something that's not a good representation of your work, and people see that, well, you've just diluted yourself and your image and what you can provide for people.
That social media aspect, right?
Yeah, it's just like you're saying,
always be your best self.
Mm-hmm.
With a fake plane and like, yeah, but it works, man.
It does. It does. And I think most people, I used to think people were interested in the process. Now I really don't think they are. Largely, you know, they want it to seem easy from that perspective. That's what gives that, you know, sort of excitement and mind blowingness, is they want it to seem easy. You know, if you saw how much work some of these people were putting into their act, and you'd be like, damn, like, because you're not getting that much result from it. You know, like they say it takes 25 hours of writing to write a single joke. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it doesn't seem wrong to me, you know? And so like, what people want to see is this condensed act of just like bam, 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 you know, just punching. And that's a lot of fun. It's fun to do, but it takes a long time to develop that ability and that string of stuff. And then it's also temporary too. Like, you might have, you know, material that it'll work this month, but like, you know, I got a cocaine bear joke right now that's hilarious, but in 2 years, people will be like, what's cocaine bear? You know,
Free bird. Are there any good hecklers? Has there ever been a show you've been to when like afterwards all the comedians were like, dude, the heckler at 3 hours in, chef's kiss, like that guy actually made this show better? Has that ever happened? Or is heckling just like a universally despised thing?
It mostly is universally despised. I don't want to say I'm pro heckle, but I'm pretty neutral. So I think sometimes it can save the show. I think sometimes it can be a lot of fun. It just depends on the environment. Like if you go and see a stage show where it's like a comedian's doing a theater and there's 1,000 people, shut up. Just don't say anything. Be quiet. It's a performance. But if you're in an open mic club and there's 10 people in there and the comedian's bombing, I mean, I wouldn't say like yell out just for the sake of it, but if you can make that vibe funny, because I feel like that's an energy too, right? Like there's a funny energy where people will just laugh for no reason, you know? And so for comedy, we want to somehow try to invite that energy in, if we can somehow figure out a way to get that in. So I think there can be a room like that, but it's got to be kind of understood. I'm doing a show next week that's a crowd work show. So it's focused specifically on crowd work. So people are allowed to kind of shout out. And at one of my mics, we do a ton of like improvisational joke writings in the moment where people will, holler out stuff like they do stand up on the spot. And then the comedian just kind of has to riff off of that and see what they can do. And I think that's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but it's also like kind of presented in that container, like if you're at a show and it's a stand-up show and all of that, like you probably, it's that stuff's mostly written. They expect, even if they're doing crowd work, they know what the person's going to say. And they're, it's kind of all sort of rehearsed. But when you're in a smaller environment, like an open mic or a small club or something like that, sometimes it can be very fun to engage. I love engaging with the audience when I can. When you first start doing comedy, it's not an opportunity that you get to do very much crowd work. People who do crowd work are very established and have been doing it for a long time, because most of the open mics, it'll be 5 or 6 people and they're all comics. So you can't be like doing crowd work on a comic. It's like, hey, fuck you, buddy. It's like, that's the guy who's going to go up next after you or whatever, like you don't want to offend anybody.
You bummed a ride from him to get there. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you just call him out on stage, which is funny in a way. But yeah, like I don't have really a problem with people. I want to engage and interact. I think the most important thing is interaction with the audience, and that it's hard. It's easy to lose that. But you have to work to be able to keep their energy and attention. And sometimes, a heckle can make all the difference. And sometimes it can just turn the show, and it'll and people, I think, are on your side if someone heckles you, from the audience. But I've also seen it too, to where the comedian just loses that interaction as well, which is also very fun.
Well, if they become serious at any point, that's another unwritten rule, that if you get heckled and then you drop your comedic timing and then become serious, you immediately lose. And there's that transfer of, and I really do, like on this occult level, it's like I'm in the audience and this guy's got all this energy and everyone's been pouring their energy into him and he's not doing anything with it. Like I can do something with that energy, so let me heckle. And then now all of a sudden the focus is on me. And if I can make you lose your footing and now you look like an asshole, it's almost like I got some of that energy, right? And it might just be a quick dopamine rush and then it dissipates back through the room. But there's a very real transaction going on there.
Definitely so. And some people think some people think that, oh, I'll make the show better by heckling. And 99% of the time, that's just not the case. But
a little joke book of like their heckles are like pre-written out.
Yeah, I had somebody come in and kind of do that, and then first thing they did was like say something about my hair and or my lack thereof of hair, and then I had a quip that I just like, already had in my mind, and I just threw that back at them, and that shut right up, and I just went on with the show.
Shuffling through like, damn, let me get the back.
Damn, he got me on that. How did he know I was going to call him bald? It's only been 15 years, But yeah, I think it can be fun. I like engaging with the audience. I encourage that, and honestly, I've gotten punchlines from the audience just doing crowd work to them, asking them about their spiritual practice or whatever, right? And then just feeling that out, and something will happen. We'll come together on something. Somebody will shout something out that'll be hilarious, or I'll think of something in response to something that someone shouted that's hilarious, and then it winds up coming into my act because it's funny. It just happened in that moment, and it was like it was the right thing. So yeah, I love that. I think engaging and interacting with the audience is great, as long as it's in good taste,
Yeah, that's before the aristocrats joke comes out, right?
Oh my God, I love that so much. We need to do an aristocrats night here.
So that's another one. Like, man, if you are not really funny, that's something. Because what is it? It's like a 5 to 15 minute setup. And then if you can't deliver that punchline, man, that's like a very awkward build up to a nothing. So
Yeah.
I've seen someone try and tell an aristocrat's joke before that didn't deliver, and it's just like, come on.
Yeah, that's tough because you got to do a different take on it that hasn't been done, or else it's really not gonna. I mean, especially since that documentary has been out, like there's some high standards to try to beat
another
out.
Secret Society reference, man. Like that joke was kind of they mentioned it a few times. I don't know if by name, but it's like an initiation ritual that once you've heard someone tell this, and then once you yourself have told it, and it doesn't happen out in like the public, it happens in a small like inner sanctum of like the elites, right?
Wow.
So there's so many cool correlations of that, but we're running a little bit long, and I don't want to have you go without doing a little PCP with me. So have you done PCP before?
I have not.
Okay, if you look under your chair, there's a little so I'm gonna rapid fire some conspiracy and paranormal related questions at you.
Awesome.
And I want you to just give me a 0 to 10 rating.
Okay.
0 means I don't care, I don't even think about it, and 10's like stay, I'm gonna convince you of it after this is over. Here's a pamphlet, we meet at the docks on Wednesday, whatever.
Okay.
So are you ready for this?
I'm ready, dude.
Let's do it.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
All right, question 1. Is Alex Jones and Bill Hicks the same person? Or I'm gonna make it a statement. Alex Jones and Bill Hicks are the same person. 0 to 10.
0.
0. Wow. Okay, strong words right out the box. Andy Kaufman died in 1984.
10.
Oh, okay. Wow, we're very polarizing today. I like it though. Richard Pryor was in the CIA.
5.
Okay. Lenny Bruce overdosed.
3.
Oh wow. Robin Williams was in the Illuminati.
9.
Joan Rivers was right about the thing that she said about the president's wife.
11.
11. We're gonna get into that. Ghosts are real. Like a Victorian creepy ghost wandering the halls.
7.
Bigfoot's real.
8.
Reptilian shapeshifters from the Draco star system are real, and they've stepped foot on the planet Earth.
6.
The Earth is flat.
2.
The Earth is hollow.
8.
Okay. The Earth is a perfect sphere. Well, okay, not perfect. The Earth is round.
9.
Dinosaurs are real.
8.
Okay. Let's see. Chemtrails are real.
Oh, that's a 10.
Oh man. I want to ask you, what are some conspiracy theories that you don't believe that a lot of other people do believe?
So I don't think that things are quite so specifically orchestrated. As to kind of reference what we were talking about earlier with energy and how crowds and groups and their minds work, I think it's a little bit less like that claw that goes down and like picks up a thing or whatever. It's less like that, and it's more like a movement, like a wave. So I think a lot of the conspiracies that we hear are true, but I don't know that they went necessarily according to some specific exact plan. I think it's more like energy moving in a certain direction and people knowing how to kind of play with that energy, that polarizing energy and the negation. I can't remember what the book is. It escapes me, but there's a quote where he says basically, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but the conspiracy theorists themselves are the people who are mostly pushing our movement, that they're helping us. This is like some technocratic book in like the 50s or 60s, and I can't remember the name of, but the whole idea is that the conspiracy theorists are themselves, whoever we or they are pushing these agendas forward, really unconsciously, by following them and becoming obsessed with them, and then sharing the information, and then, putting all that out there.
I want to talk about Joan Rivers. This is a family show. This is for kids, so let's not get too crazy. But she basically made a very specific implication about the president's at the time's wife/husband, I guess. She put it into a gray area. So, and you said 11, and I know some of it is funny, and I think it's one of the funniest things that it was the best exiting joke of any comedian. Really, it's gonna live, like, that joke's gonna live on longer than she, like, literally than she will. But like, is this like a popular inside joke? I had never heard it before that, so I'm curious, how much of that was a joke? How much of that do you think she believed, like, truly, and how much, like, do people outside, believe it?
So I don't think she probably, I don't know. I'm going to speculate and say that she probably didn't fully believe it, but saw an opportunity for some hilarious joke and took that, because there is, like, a whole movement of people who are, like, into this conspiracy. And there's a ton of different pictures that they'll show. I've seen a few videos. They're pretty funny, of different people and their genders being the opposite of what we're publicly told. Bill Gates being one of them, with that, like, leany, he's, like, laying across the desk. And then his wife too. And then they draw on their jaw lines and do all this kind of stuff. And I'm not 100% involved in that as a conspiracy, but I thought that joke was absolutely hilarious. I put 11, obviously, as a little bit, I was being a little bit hyperbolic, but I think it's interesting and hilarious and very curious that was the last joke she ever made against Michelle Obama.
Yeah, you better be careful how much you laugh at that one.
Right.
And another example, man, of, like, borderline hate speech, except the messenger gets to be the royal court jester, right? If it were almost anyone else, not to be like, I couldn't say that because I'm a white man, but there really is something about Joan Rivers saying that specific accusation that if it was, like, Ben Shapiro that made the accusation, it might have gone over differently, right?
Yeah, 100% it would have.
So Andy Kaufman, I know I just meant, and yeah, I think he probably also died in 1984. I don't know, but there's a small comedy conspiracy theory that he faked his own death, and that's only because he was so good at playing this weird deadpan character, I guess. I don't know. I just want to get your general thoughts on Andy Kaufman. Like, is he in his own category? Did he, like, are we ever going to see another Andy Kaufman? Do you think that comedy still works? Was it? Was he funny because he existed in a specific moment of time?
I think he had a very specific and unique skill where he just kind of knew how to mess with people, very, very well. I mean, look at all the wrestling stuff. That's one of the best, dude.
Oh. And it's so hard to describe because it's not just a routine. It's like he put the whole world on for such a, oh man.
Oh, dude. And wrestling the women and being that huge, despicable, misogynistic character. It was so good. And I think the time of that definitely had a lot to do with it. But I think if he were alive now, he could find other things to poke at. So, I mean, I just think he was just specifically, like, when you see him do that bit with the congas and he's like, it turns into, like, music and stuff. I mean, he was in a different category, and I think he would be again. I think Jim Carrey also, I would say, did an amazing job playing him in that movie. It was incredible. But yeah, I don't think he would fake his death. I don't think he would have had to. I think he could have gone away if he wanted to still, at that point. So I don't really see the point in faking his death, but
just as, like, the ultimate inside joke.
Maybe so. I mean, I can see why he might want to do that, I guess. but I don't know. I don't know if he did or not. That's a good question. I don't think
And you
so.
gave a 0 to Alex Jones
Bill
and Bill
Hicks.
Hicks.
Yeah.
I agree. I just because I've seen Alex Jones try to tell a joke before, and there's just you couldn't not be Bill Hicks. I guess that's my ultimate argument against it.
I love Bill Hicks so much. I like Alex Jones too. I don't as a character, as a figure. And I've seen those
WWF wrestler,
documentaries. Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen those documentaries too that people have done, and they're interesting and intriguing. But then whenever I see Alex, whenever I see Alex, I don't see the correlation there really. And I think that he would be I think he would be a lot funnier if it was true, a lot funnier. But Bill Hicks is my favorite. Like, he's my favorite comedian, probably of all time. So that's part of it too. It's like, even because I think Bill Hicks would have out trolled Trump, and Alex Jones got out trolled by Trump. So,
you know what? And Bill Hicks also existing in his own category, which it's very hard to describe him because he's not as specific of a flavor as Andy Kaufman is, where at least even if you don't understand Kaufman's thing, you understand what he's doing. But Bill Hicks, violating like almost everything I was saying earlier, like, he could get mad on stage and angry and pissed off and like get into a legit argument with a heckler, but then go right back in the jokes in a way that I've never seen any comedian ever be able to do. Like, his anger was funny, but it was, I mean, again, it's impossible for me to put into words because, it's like taking an LSD trip, right? Bill Hicks would probably like that kind of analogy.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was incredible, and he wasn't always funny either. He was sometimes on one, but like you said,
boy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But everyone liked that, but
No.
then it turned into a thing, right? Then he would I don't know, there was something magic about it.
And then
I'm biased because I don't
yeah.
know if you can see it behind me. I've got a Bill Hicks poster behind me. He's got the
Awesome.
little cowboy hat on. It's a little blurry. But
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, dude. Yeah, 100%. Huge fan of that guy, and yeah, he had an amazing ability to jump in from some crazy rant into a joke. And one of my favorite jokes of his is like just a very simple physical joke where he's like, how about a joke? How about some comedy? I always love to put a little comedy in my act. And he does the impression of Mick Jagger, where he just takes a cigarette and puts it in the mic stand and walks away from it. Oh my God. It's so funny, dude. I'm sorry,
So
not Mick Jagger, but the other.
I think talking about Bill Hicks is the perfect way to end this off. We were started talking about comedy. Let's put it out on the reigning champ, the notorious B.I.G. Tupac combination of rap, which was Bill Hicks. But then the next in line, the next to take the throne, is Owen Hunt, aka Bootsy Greenwood. Where can people find you? Where's the Blue Collar Mystics? What are the Blue Collar Mystics? What websites do we type in? Where do we send the money?
All right, guys. First off, I go by Bootsy Greenwood. That's my stripper name. So, if you're looking for a good time late night, holler at me. That's what I go by on Instagram. And if you type that into Facebook or any of the other search engines, you will find me. Blue Collar Mystics is the name of my podcast. Blue Collar Mystics. I believe we really kind of all are Blue Collar Mystics. It's really a practical approach to spirituality, sense of humor, really opened up to the mysteries of the universe and learning all the time. I've got a lot of audiobooks that are up on my channel. I just rebranded my channel to Bootsy Greenwood, but the podcast is still Blue Collar Mystics, and you can find that Bootsy Greenwood on YouTube, or if you type in Blue Collar Mystics, it'll come right up to even in a Google search, and you'll be able to find the podcast, which is on Blue Collar Mystics, and then my personal page, which is Bootsy Greenwood. I've got some audiobooks and I've got some comedy on my page. Go and check that out and shoot me a message. I'm very responsive and excited to hear from anyone. So hit me up.
Word. Links in the description to everything that Bootsy just pointed out. Maybe even some dates to like shows or link to a calendar or something. But yeah, we're gonna support Bootsy the best that we can. drop a comment, go follow him, go click on Blue Collar Mystics, give him a 4-star review. I didn't say 5 because you don't want him to get complacent. You always want to give someone else. Give him a 5-star review. Don't give him a 4. All right. I love you guys. Also, buy this thing right here. Buy it.
They said it was forbidden. They said it was dangerous. They were right. Introducing the Paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual. Dive into the arcane, into the hidden corners of the occult. This isn't just a comic. It's a hidden tome of supernatural power. All original artwork illustrating the groundbreaking research of Juan Ayala, one of the only living homunculologists of our time. Learn how to summon your own homunculus, an enigma wrapped in the fabric of reality itself, their power at your fingertips, their existence, your secret. Explore the mysteries of the Aristotelian, the spiritual, the Paracelsian, the Crowleyan homunculus. Ancient knowledge lost to time, now unearthed in this forbidden tale. This comic book holds truths not meant for the light of day. Knowledge that was buried, feared, and shunned. Are you ready to uncover the hidden? The Paranoid American Homunculus Owner's Manual, not for the faint of heart. Available now from Paranoid American. Get your copy at tjojp.com or paranoidamerican.com today.